After a 45-minute delay, President Cyril Ramaphosa finally announced his much-anticipated cabinet that will comprise the government of national unity. It is a bigger cabinet comprised by 32 ministers and 43 deputies. It's a more inclusive cabinet. It's got around 11 political parties represented, and it's a more younger cabinet. I believe that the youngest minister is around 34. She's the Minister of Basic Education. But is it a cabinet that will take South Africa to a firmer growth path and rid it of the poverty and inequality and unemployment that it has been shackled by for way too long? I'm joined by Mtho, the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, that's SACCI, as well as Coovadia, CEO of Business Unity South Africa, BUSA. Gentlemen, to the both of you, thanks so much for your time. And Cas, perhaps let me begin with you. Should we read anything into the fact that the president was so late? I mean, he called a meeting, a family meeting, for 9 o'clock. He hadn't even arrived at the union buildings by the time that most South Africans were waiting for him on their couches. In fact, he came in at around 9:40 and stood at the podium at 9:45. Should we read anything into it? Because some of the media reporters who were on the ground said that he was still making calls to some of these individuals who were part of his new cabinet.
You know, I think we could speculate. I'm not too sure how useful it is to speculate about why the delay. Certainly our point of view at BUSA is that the country is where the country is at. I think the GNU was the most appropriate outcome and must commend the political parties for that. And I think we've now got to have a positive mindset to work together to actually make this government work and to do what it should be doing to attract investment and enable us to put our country onto a growth path. So, you know, I'm not going to speculate on why the delay. There might have been last-minute talks. There might have been other logistic problems. But I think we've now got to move forward. The cabinet is in place. And I think as South Africans, we need to put our shoulders to the wheel to make this work.
Okay, so let's move it forward then. Mtho, your take on the cabinet that is in place right now, and is it the right cabinet that will move South Africa forward, in your view?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having us. Good afternoon to the viewers. Look, I think the first thing that we must appreciate, and we do appreciate, is SACCI, that if finally we have a cabinet. You know, stability is very important for us as business, so we therefore welcome the fact that a cabinet has been set up. Obviously, whether it's the right or wrong one, we will have to test it against what we call a meritocracy template, which unfortunately has not come out in the president's statement, where he firmly assures South Africans that this is what we are actually trying to achieve, and these are the right men and women. So we are hoping to engage the cabinet squarely on a performance-based rating, on saying we need to make sure that this cabinet sticks together and is united by performance and service to South African businesses.
Cas, do you have any questions on the individuals that were appointed for the specific portfolios? Some of the feedback that we received was, I mean, what does the current Minister of Agriculture know about agriculture? Is he technically competent for that position? And that was just one of the comments that were made around the appointments. Your view on the people who were elected and whether you have any questions about it?
Yeah, so firstly, let me say we're quite happy with some of the financial and economic appointments. I think Minister Godongwana coming back into finance, we're quite happy with. I think the appointment of Minister Mtho heading up GTIC, I think, is a very good appointment. I think Minister Ramaphosa staying with electricity, and electricity being made now a formal ministry and not in the presidency, I think is good. And there are other good appointments. It's quite clear that you know, competencies and qualifications and so on are not necessarily matched to the ministerial appointments that have been made. I guess it was the appointments were as a result of hard bargaining and hard negotiations between the various parties. I'm not convinced that a minister needs to be fully qualified in the area that he or she has been appointed in. I think that what we would be looking from any minister is, one, that the minister buys into where we are positioning the country and how we are positioning the country, and then leads his or her department to ensure that we implement according to the vision we have set. I think the minister needs to have leadership qualities. I think the minister in this particular context, in the context of the GNU, needs to appreciate that he or she needs to work with ministers from other parties to actually take this country forward. And it's those sorts of qualities that we would look for in a minister. The capabilities, the technical skill and so on are in the department. And we trust that those are in the departments, and it's up to the minister to manage the department in a way that optimizes those and actually implements the policies that have been agreed.
Mm-hmm. Mtho, your view then, and perhaps maybe you just flesh out what SACCI does mean by a meritocracy template by virtue of the individuals that were appointed, and whether there are individuals that were appointed to certain portfolios that you do find questionable as SACCI.
Look, we do not find any one of those appointees questionable. Naturally, they are all politicians, so we all understand their background. They stand there to serve a particular mandate. We do, however, mean that when you become a minister, you're effectively the executive head of the department. So the president will do right to the country if he's able to demonstrate that these are the kind of people who have this particular skill set and are the right political heads for these departments. Because we are moving into a country where execution and performance and consequence management must be the order of the day. So appointments is one thing, but I think we need to walk the journey to understand, to say, is the skill set the right people who are doing the work? If you look at someone like Minister Mtho, for instance, I would like to make an example about him. He is a political appointee who has demonstrated clear understanding of his job. I would like to have other ministers also talking with that level of intensity and deep understanding of the skill and obviously the ability to manage performance of their officials. So we don't question any appointment, but we are saying that ultimately whoever is appointed must demonstrate that they have a clear understanding of their responsibilities and what is required from their ministries.
Some other feedback we've received, of course, is the fact that continuity has persisted in the right areas. I mean, Cass, you made reference to the continuity that has happened in the Ministry of Finance. Others were talking about the continuity that remained in the minister or the presidency, rather, just suggesting that this means that Operation Vulindlela will continue and perhaps be accelerated at quicker pace to meet on its economic development targets. But on the Ministry of Finance and all the others, Cass, I want to know whether you have a concern around how bloated this administration is. I mean, just given the fact that, it has been an area of contention for some time, although the president did make us aware as to why the cabinet had increased instead of declining. But what could it possibly mean for the fiscal prudence that the finance minister has committed to? And is there a chance that he might go off track as a result of the bloatedness?
Yeah, look, the cabinet heading, the size of the cabinet has increased. We've been calling for a decrease in the size of the cabinet. But again, it's where we are. It's a government of national unity. One way of keeping that government together is to try and be equitable in the allocation of seats in cabinet. And I think the president found himself in a situation where, to accommodate the 10 parties in the government of national unity, he had to increase the size of his cabinet. Now, it's not ideal. And I think that we're going to have to watch very, very closely how the expenses related to the cabinet are managed. I think that the president is going to have to be pretty firm in ensuring that we cut down on unnecessary expenditure related to capitation. And I think the Minister of Finance is going to have to be very, very clear that he will not tolerate unnecessary expenditure. And, we need to, with a cabinet this size, we need to look at how we manage, for instance, travel expenditure for ministers, how ministers utilize public resources and public infrastructure in fulfilling their responsibilities. And all of that will have to be looked at. The appointments were as a result of the political situation we find ourselves in the GNU. And it's one way of keeping the GNU together. And if it contributes to keeping the GNU together, then I think that's a cost we have to bear.
Okay.
But I think that both business and other parts of civil society will need to keep a very, very close eye on how this government operates and how the cabinet operates. Okay. If we're paying more, we need to get significant value for money, and we need to make sure that that happens.
Mtho, your thoughts also on policy and the potential implications. I mean, you look at a portfolio like health, where we do know there was areas of contention, particularly around the NHI, National Health Insurance, and the ANC continues to lead there in terms of being the minister and occupying the deputy ministry post. You look at trade and industry and competition, where we do know there has also been contentions around black economic empowerment, for instance, labour, for instance, just mergers and acquisitions, for instance. ANC continuing to dominate those portfolios as well, although with the additional deputy from the Democratic Alliance. And even if you look at a portfolio like international relations, where we do know, again, there were differences in terms of South Africa's foreign policy when it came to matters like Russia and Ukraine, and even the Israel and Gaza dispute, the war. Again, contentions, but ANC continuing to dominate. What do you deduce from this, Mtho, as SACCI, in terms of policy and how it moves forward under this GNU?
Well, look, the cabinet does give you a very strong sense that the ANC is going to continue to be the leader of this government. I think they have deployed very competent people amongst their ranks to probably protect their biggest interests. So we think we can still work with all these ministers. I mean, we remember maintain relationships with all of them. So even Minister Lamula, we think we can still work with him because obviously he understands our outlook on economic diplomacy. So we are happy in that regard. We as business obviously still want to continue to engage government about the shape and the structure of the NHI. And we have found Minister Matwaledi to be engageable. And in trade and competition, we think Minister Pakstau will hit the ground running much better. There are a lot of gaps. There's a lot of acting leaders there. For instance, the Director General must be appointed. Competition needs to operate in such a way that it grows and allows us to become a globalized player. So the ANC definitely has kept those positions because they want to maintain their policy in that regard. But the good thing is that this government is generally engageable, and they've been working with us in the sixth administration to work and allow private sector to influence its work. So we are hoping that the policy, even though the ANC is going to be guided on who is sitting there, it will be flexible and it will understand the needs of business.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks so much for your insights and analysis. I'm Mtho, President of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry of SACCI, as well as Coovadia, CEO of Business Unity of South Africa, that is BUSA. We're actually getting a further reaction on the new political dispensation here in South Africa called the GNU Dawn in some quarters.